Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Hwang, Assistant Director for Programs here at Asia Society New York. It is my pleasure to continue on with our Business and Market Insights series of programs where we aim to provide perspectives on the business world on a variety of topics. And today, we are joined by award-winning business journalist Yifan Yu from Nikkei Asia. She is Nikkei's US tech correspondent and part of the team that put together the series on the looming AI energy crisis. For those who have probably seen this, we have provided links on our website to some of the reporting that is part of that series. So if you hadn't had a chance to read it, please take the time to do so. Now, as many as you know, AI's development has provoked an opening of thought and imagination on how it revolutionizes industries and drive innovation. But it is not all positive. There are worries about what it will do to jobs, labor, among those concerns surrounding AI development. And then on top of that, emerging among these concerns is on the energy and the environment. So recently at the Asia Society, we hosted Max Levchin, the co-founder of PayPal, and Alok Sama, former president and CFO of SoftBank. And already in that event, as well before, questions were being raised on the impact of AI on the environment and its energy footprint. So today, we asked Yifan to provide us a briefing on her and her team's findings through the course of their investigation and research for the series. Now, this event is on the record and will be posted for later viewing. We will set aside some time for Q&A towards the end, and participation is encouraged. So please feel free to submit questions via the comment section in LinkedIn, but you can also email moderator@asiasociety.org if you want to do so anonymously. But we do encourage you to ask the question on the comment section. Before I turn it over to Yifan, please do take the time to visit our website at asiasociety.org/ny and sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date with future events. We will have more like these, along with other offerings in policy, the arts, and culture. I would also like to take this time to thank Nikkei Asia for their partnership with us today. And thank you all for joining us. So Yifan, I turn it over to you.
Thank you for the kind introduction, John, and thanks everyone for joining this important discussion today. I very much look forward to your question by the end of it. So as John mentioned, I'm the US tech correspondent for Nikkei Asia. So naturally, I've been following the rise of generative AI and its implications very closely in the past few years. There are a lot of good things to say about the changes AI has or about to bring to our society. But one topic I think that had been largely overlooked is the impact AI has on our energy network and more broadly on the climate. I think this is also a topic that's somewhat controversial, like the headline of the event, the AI energy crisis. I'm sure some of you might disagree on whether there is indeed an energy crisis coming brought by AI when you look at that headline. I've heard some critics when by talking to executives and industry participants, they argue that this fear of energy crisis is actually overblown. We've seen these digital booms before in the Web 2.0 and smartphone era, and our grid just naturally adapted accordingly and kept up with the rising demand. And also, of course, AI efficiency could also be improving. The energy use per unit of AI performance could drop very sharply as chips and data center infrastructure improves, making the net impact manageable. Sam Altman actually said in a very recent blog post, I think just last week, he said something like, in 2030s, intelligence and energy, ideals and the ability to make ideals happen are going to be widely abundant. It's a very promising future he is laying out for us, but is that really going to be the case? Let's look at the data, the concrete data point we've seen so far, and the evidence is not that promising. Just in April, the International Energy Agency released its latest report on AI energy demand, and it projected that data centers will consume about 945 terawatt hours of electricity, driven primarily by AI. If you don't know what's 945 terawatt hours of electricity, like it's a lot of energy. And put it in perspective, it's about Japan's entire country's total electricity consumption today. So in 2030, the AI data center will consume as much energy as the entire country of Japan. That is shocking. And not to mention, it's more than doubling the 415 terawatt hours of electricity being used by data center we see in 2024. So the rise is really rapid. And that predictions IEA made is not based on the worst case scenario. It's actually based on the infrastructure we have today for data centers and also the improvement we've seen so far. So that means despite the better chips, the more efficient energy infrastructure we are already putting in place in the past few years, because of the rapid demand from AI, the energy consumption for AI will still surge at an unprecedented pace. But does that necessarily mean will certainly lead to energy prices? No, I don't think so. But dismissing this alarming trend and just assuming our grid will catch up with what AI consumes, or even more optimistically to think, AI will solve this supply and demand equation for us, that could lead to an actual crisis. And the other perspective of this is that the projected energy used by AI could easily go up or even doubling, tripling if we let private sector company decide however much energy they'd like to use. So at the semiconductor company AMD's AI Day last week, Sam Altman was OpenAI's Sam Altman was a keynote speaker, and he made a comment that worries me a little bit. He said at some point down the line, a significant fraction of the power on Earth should be spent running AI compute. And Altman's concern, his concern is, by that time, will there be enough GPUs to keep up with that much AI compute? But I think for everyone else, the real question is it really worth it for the Earth to spend that much energy on AI? I think we'll discuss that a little bit today later at the later half of my briefing. Before we go into that, let's take a step back and delve a little bit into why AI consumes so much energy. The 945 terawatt hours of electricity, why does it need so much of it by 2030? So most of the AI we use today is run on the cloud. Edge AI takes part of it, but it's still a small part of it so far. And before there is a ChatGPT, there's foundation models like the GPTs, the Geminis, the DeepSeeks. And training and running those large models use specialized accelerators like Nvidia's GPUs. And in addition to the GPUs, they also need very high density server clusters and also data storage systems. And putting all of those together, you got a very complex data center. And running those complex systems requires a lot of energy. And data center, you've been to one, it's a very fragile and delicate ecosystem. It needs to be kept under a certain temperature, so it needs to be cooled constantly, especially when there is so much computing going on all the time. So whether you are air cool or liquid cool the data center, it requires a significant cooling, adding to that energy load we were talking about. So in practice, what does that mean? When you type in a GPT query on your computer, it sends that query to the cloud, and then it's processed in the data center, and it sends back the answer to you. And that process, this is official data from OpenAI. They just released it. It's averagely, every ChatGPT query you use, it uses about 0.34 watt hours of energy. So what does that mean? It means roughly if you turn your oven on for a little over a second, or it can be used to light up a high efficiency light bulbs for a couple minutes. I know it may not sound like a lot, right? Like just turn my oven on for a second or light my light bulbs for a few minutes. But think about this. How many queries do you send to GPT or other AI every day? Like it's probably in the hundreds. And you may just want to chat with ChatGPT very randomly saying hi. And if it's not even a real query, it takes that much energy already. And if we multiply that by the millions and in the future, billions of people using AI every day, that's an unfathomable amount of ovens and light bulbs. So now we know why AI needs so much energy. Let's also break it down a little bit of where we are seeing people use most AI, and by extension, of course, that need the most energy. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that the US and China are leading the AI consumptions and leading the AI build out, and also leading the AI data center energy consumptions. The IEA report shows the United States accounted for about like 45% of all data center energy consumption in 2024, and China accounted for about 25%, and Europe followed at about 15%. And in the future, by 2030, those three regions are still going to be the top energy consumption for data centers because of the AI build out we've seen so far. And more specifically in the US, the data center accounted for about like more than half of all the electricity demand we're going to see grow between now and 2030. By the time the end of the decade, the energy consumption we see for data centers gonna surpass all the aluminum, steel, cement, chemical, and all those like energy intensive, what we consider as like dirty products, gonna consume for electricity. So that means like data center is actually be the number one heavy industrial products by the end of the decade. And of course, other regions are also going to see strong growth in AI and data center development. I think one region that I find most surprising is Southeast Asia, because it has rapidly become a data center hubs, and it's projected to be doubling its data center capacity by 2030, particularly in the countries Singapore and Malaysia. A lot of those, growth either in US, in China, or in Southeast Asia is driven by this concept, sovereign AI. So many countries now see AI capacity as a very strategic national security and competitiveness. I think just yesterday, U.S. Department of Defense awarded OpenAI with a 1-year, $200 million contract to putting their AI into, government use. It's no denial that AI will be used in military defense purposes and other very national security critical functions. So it's natural that countries and governments want to establish a sovereign AI that they can maintain their leadership, and that is safe AI for them to use. So in practice, that would mean investing in domestic AI models, local data centers, and even national chips. I know China is actually leading the development of sovereign AI, partly because of the US China tech decoupling and trade tension. It kind of has to rely on its, AI models, its AI chips. But more countries are building out local data centers and trying to find their own AI champions because they know how critical the AI race has become for a country's future. And sovereign AI is a big part of every country's, or will become a country's national strategy going forward. Well, there's a lot of good intention and also, of course, a national importance to that sovereign AI strategy. That approach is also sharply increased energy and infrastructure needs. So as every nation builds its own AI stacks, either it's, duplicating very expensive data centers that could otherwise be shared, or building its own large language foundational models, just because they feel like they have to have their own LLMs instead of rely on GPT or Gemini or other US or Chinese models. The result of training and building out those infrastructure is a higher overall power demand, and every country is adding to their own carbon footprint. On the regulatory front, that would also mean like this combination of national pride and also regulatory lag could let sovereign AI be an opportunity for infrastructure overreach. Government could subsidize, very bloated facilities and relax the environmental standards to claim tech leadership. And this could also postpone the very efficiency and all the coordination that sustainability of the entire global network system. And, companies will leverage these opportunities to push the government, give them as much resources as possible, which I don't know. The outcome, we'll have to wait to see whether the outcome will prevailing the need for energy demand and other climate impact. Now we know, U.S., China, and obviously Europe and Asia are leading some of this rising energy demand. We have to ask, where are those countries and companies find energy, especially in countries like Japan and Singapore? It's very resources constrained. I think a common exception we see on the headline is you see all those hyperscalers, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, they pledge to be carbon neutral or negative by 2030 or something along that timeline. You will think, their data center must be all powered by renewable energy. I think that's a misconception a lot of people have, but that's not the case. Most of the data centers require constant high capacity energy. That means they have to be connected to the grid, not rely on something like solar farm because it's on and off all the time. So they will have to use whatever infrastructure the city they build their data center in. The way they achieve carbon neutral on activity is through power purchasing. So if I use this much power of, on coal or gas powered energy, I will buy this much renewable energy elsewhere to offset my carbon impact. That's how it works right now. So as we build out more data centers, it's not necessarily all the new data centers are cleaner than before. That really depends on, what the city infrastructure, what the current grid and energy supply has to offer to decide whether it leaves this much carbon footprint or it's fewer or more carbon footprint than before. But why companies care so much about being carbon neutral or carbon negative? I think one of the most interesting conversations I had during my reporting about this topic is with a chip executive in California. Basically, he told me, you don't have to care about environment to care about money. for companies, this is not a matter of, ESG or just, looking good. It's really about their bottom lines. The more energy efficient you are, the more money you save. This is why we can see from chip makers like Nvidia, AMD, Intel, and others, one of the biggest selling points they have for their latest AI chip is always this is more energy efficient than previous generations or than our competitors. Why do they advertise that? It's because they know this is what their customers care about when they build out the data center. They care about how much energy they use and how much energy they consume every day, so they can, maximize the benefit of these chips. But going back to where are countries and companies finding the energy, of course, they need clean, consistent, high capacity energy to, make this AI data center build out a sustainable, future-proof effort. Not all governments are prioritizing, being clean at this stage. Like in the US, we all know this famous saying, drill, baby, drill. So the priority right now for the US is build out massive projects like Stargate in Texas, where it can be powered by some of the less clean traditional coal and gas power plant, and then maybe transitioning into more clean energy like nuclear. I do want to talk a little bit about nuclear energy because that's such a hot topic right now. You see President Trump signed an executive order, I think in May, to say they want to regain, the nuclear energy leadership for the US. But why nuclear is such a hot topic? Because unlike solar or wind, that's, it really depends on the weather, where you locate the farms or what time of the day. It's not a very consistent energy supply that's suitable for the data centers. But nuclear energy is actually quite clean, consistent, and high capacity. And obviously, it's zero carbon emissions. It can run 24/7, and it's enough electricity to support an entire city or a clusters of very energy hungry data centers for a very small footprint. And in that aspect, I think tech giants, the private sector, is actually leading the charge in revolutionize and leverage nuclear energy more than the country. Microsoft, for example, they have hiring like departments that to explore building small modular reactors to power their data infrastructures. And also the next generation reactors are going to be faster to deploy and safer and cheaper than traditional nuclear plants. And of course, that's what they are promising us right now. We don't necessarily know whether that's going to be the future. But nuclear is definitely something all countries and companies are investing in. The US and Canada are doing this. China is actually building reactors faster than any countries. They have a national strategy to triple its nuclear energy capacity by 2035 to meet with these surging tech and industrial demands, and they are very aggressive about it. And they currently has more than 25 nuclear reactors under constructions, just because they see AI and also the energy demand for AI is such an important part of the country's future. And also in Saudi Arabia, you see the President Trump and his tech envoy just did a big trip there. They're doing a lot of the AI infrastructure build out there as well. And they obviously, it's a desert region. They need a lot of energy and water resources. They are figuring out a way to build out the clean infrastructure as well. I talked to their Alat, the Sovereign Tech Fund, which is mostly doing AI infrastructure investment. And I think they also mentioned nuclear will be an option they're going to explore in the future. But of course, nuclear has challenges, the cost, the regulations, the waste, and obviously safety. We all know what happened in Fukushima a few years ago. But I think like the reason people are still so invested in nuclear because it's one of the very rare renewable clean energy that can be consistent at high density. There are also new innovations coming out of that aspect in recent years, like nuclear fusion. We at Nikkei just reported this week that Japan and UK has signed a MOU the other day to collaboratively develop nuclear fusion technology. So the UK will provide the remote control robot technology, and Japan's will manufacturing that. So they want to do a viable nuclear fusion demonstration by the 2030s. This is a big step forward for the nuclear energy supply. And a single nuclear fusion reaction releases like 4 times more than nuclear fission, which is like the current technology we use in nuclear reactors. And it's also safer. So as we can see from both the private sector and the government, nuclear energy is something the AI future might have to factor in. Of course, there's also other, clean energy options like solar, like wind, like hydro. All companies are investing in that as well. But the Amazon Web Service, they are actually the world's largest corporate buyers of renewable energy. It has like over 50 wind and solar projects in India alone. And it said it will match all its global electricity use, including its data centers, with new clean energy by 2025, so this year. This is like 5 years earlier than they originally planned, just because like they invested so much in pursuing buying new renewable energy everywhere. And also like AWS have said to encourage customers to train AI models in their regions that offers like renewable energy instead of regions, the data centers is powered on more, less clean energies like coal or gas. And Microsoft, Google, the other 2 hyperscalers, and which combined together, AWS, Microsoft, Google, they are like takes about 70% of the global like cloud market. And obviously, they are also making similar commitment. So we see a lot of the aspect from the private sector. They are doing a lot of good works in either buying renewable energy or investing in new technology like nuclear. But like I said in the very beginning, data centers needs very consistent energy supply. So a lot of times they're still connected to the grid at this point. Before companies can build a small nuclear reactor for their own data center, they still need the government to do the heavy lifting to transition its energy supply on the grid. And unfortunately, I think we don't see many movement in terms of government revolutionize the grid so far in terms of when we can see all the energy or a big percentage of energy supplied to the grid are going to be from renewable resources. I think as countries build out its AI infrastructure, a big part of what I'd like to see is, the government take a look at the energy demand and decide, okay, now it's really the time to change and update our grid to meet the more new and sustainable standards we need for the AI future. But regulatory and the government effort aside, for the private sector, this could also be a huge business opportunity. Like the Saudi Arabia tech investment fund Alad, they have a 100 billion clean energy manufacturing mission, which is like they say the energy infrastructure is starting to fall behind the AI demand, and so it's gonna be a lot of investment and opportunities for business to catch up with that AI demand by building out the AI infrastructure. So for our friends in the audience today who are looking for new investment opportunities, so that may be one of the area we can really look at, but that's just my 2 cents. Let's also talk a little bit about the US-China, the so-called AI race. Why is this topic so important in AI energy discussion? Because first of all, China is the biggest solar energy and water energy suppliers in the world. We all know that the solar panels, the hydro equipment we use in the US, a lot of it is from China. So as the US-China trade war escalate, that could also be factored into, the pipeline of where and how companies and countries build out their renewable energy supply chain. Maybe the US will not have that much solar farm, that much wind farm, because they don't want so much, wind pipes from China. And at the same time, the Southeast Asia could see this as an opportunity for the companies, for the countries to acquire cheaper, less expensive solar farm equipment to build out their own energy supply. So this geopolitical dynamic is actually really important. And at the same time, I think because the US and China are on a race to become the next AI powerhouse, a lot of times regulators will choose to look the other way when they see, okay, Project Stargate, it's gonna give us a head in compared to China. So I don't mind, it's gonna emit this much waste or it's gonna use this much energy, just as long as it can keep the US in the lead. It's the same thinking over in China. As long as, these models like DeepSeek is competitive, as long as the data centers can give power the next generation models or AI applications, I don't mind how much energy is going to cost me or how wasteful it is to run a big data centers. So the geopolitics aspect has obviously become a mass of its own. The countries need to debate between the benefit it can get from, supply the AI demand, supply the AI compute to, whether this is going to take energy away from my grid that I can use to build other things or supply my citizens. With projects like Stargate, we're going to see increasingly that debate from all countries. We have already seen that in Singapore. As you know, Singapore is a very small island country. A lot of the energy it uses today will be they need to be through a purchase agreement from buying from other countries like Indonesia. And they're building something, a pipeline of energy pipeline undersea, so Indonesia can supply to Singapore a lot of times for the data centers in the future. But definitely there will be questions and critics raised in both countries about why Singapore needs so much data centers, and again, why Indonesia should sell Singapore this much energy when its own countries is building out its digital infrastructure. But again, going back to the sovereign AI concept, a lot of those debates have to find the very fine balance between advancing a country's AI strategy to ensure the country's AI energy demand and not taking that energy away from other very critical infrastructures. But like Sam Altman and many other AI industry participants have said, AI can also be the solution. It's not only about the Nvidia's chips, the AMD's chips, the Intel's AI chips can get better and more energy efficient. It's also about the optimization AI can do. It's actually a quite complex process to calculate, how much data center energy we need for this particular time, because not all queries from ChatGPT going to send to the same data center at the same time. So there is a process of optimization AI can do for us to find a place, a time to use the data center that's more energy efficient. But I don't think that's going to change the equation that much, at least not right now. For me, my personal observation and from talking to people is always, finding the new energy resources, the new technology that can supply clean, stable, and high density energy to the data centers and meet with other energy demand AI needs. That is the only viable path we can see to make the AI build out more sustainable for the long term. I think right now we talk a lot about, where to find the energy, why AI needs so much energy. But circling back to the question I posed at the beginning of the webinar, should we allocate, like Sam Altman says, a significant fraction of the power on Earth to running AI compute? I think right now, even the AI industry of its own is very skeptical about not the energy. It's more about whether we should allocate that much compute to AI. We've seen reports by analysts and reporters that's already saying, Microsoft is pulling some of their data center leases globally. And especially after DeepSeek from earlier this year, people are really questioning, okay, does AI really need that much compute to build? I think that is actually a really good question for the energy side of things as well. If we can run AI models, applications more efficiently, why should we just build out massive data centers and unlimited powerful Nvidia GPUs when this is the easy way out? Why don't we take the hard way out to build an AI model that's more energy efficient and cost efficient? I think that's a question a lot of even AI industry participants are asking themselves right now. And if they can find the answer to that question, that will significantly reduce the AI energy use in the future as well. But obviously, we shouldn't, at least for me, I don't think we should give AI unlimited power unless it earns it. Since I think this is the year 3 since the boom of ChatGPT. We've seen a lot of good works AI has done so far, but a lot of it is incremental changes that doesn't necessarily promising to be something fundamental that's benefit the society so much. So for me, I think the real question is even just about should we power AI? It's what kind of AI are we powering and what kind of good does it serve? If it's helping people, saving resources, and advancing human knowledge, yes, of course, the AI deserves a seat at the energy table. But if it's just powering profit, distraction and waste, I think the policymakers and the public need to really push back on consuming more and more energy, because AI companies will always push for more energy and more resources. Because they know how critical they are to a country, and a company's perspective is always, if I can get this much energy to power this much data centers, it's always good for me, and it's giving me more leeways to develop things that's not as efficient. So the public scrutiny we put on those companies are really important. That's why I think this webinar hosted by Asia Societies come as a really critical time. And I really appreciate everybody's interest in that as well. So as we laid out of the questions, should we give AI this much energy? And as we are trying to scrutinize and finding opportunities at the same time in these AI energy crisis, whether you agree it or not, what's the next step? I think right now the world is very busy and chaotic in many ways. So a lot of the regulatory focus has been shifted away from AI regulations, especially in the US side. But going forward, ideally, in a perfect world, of course, we need to integrate energy and AI policy. It's not just about misinformation, DeepSeek. Those are very critical problems as well for AI regulation. But we also need an energy policy that's sustainable and beneficial to not just the data center operators or the AI companies. Like every citizen need to benefit from the AI advancement. And we will need to require like new data centers to use clean power or just pay some kind of carbon taxes. And also we need to put AI facilities in renewable energy accessible areas, not just putting at whichever state give them the most, tax credit or subsidies. And also for the private sector, of course, investment in the infrastructure is also a big opportunity. And areas I encourage everyone to look at, because in countries not only in the US, in Asia, in Middle East, in Europe, the AI infrastructure is still being built out, and there is an underlying supply chains that needs a very future-proofing infrastructure. Either it's from energy or from water or from the waste perspective. That can be a very good investment areas for all countries and companies to look at. And of course, the technology innovation, that's going to be a big part of the solutions as well. Either it's training AI to optimize the data center operations, the grid operations, or other ways we can leverage AI too, or develop more nuclear technologies that to power those data centers. We need to fund the R&Ds in those areas, and also fund R&Ds in energy efficient chips. This is not only about for the environment. It's also good for the business bottom line. If you can use more energy efficient chips, more efficient energy supplies. And I think another aspect that has been kind of lacking from the discussion so far is international corporations. Like AI, I think a lot of academics and AI pioneers have said AI should be borderless. It should be an international effort because it touches so many things in human lives that's common in all countries. But unfortunately, in many cases, it's not like that. There is no international AI regulatory effort that's been going on. UN has tried to do some works on that. It built an AI advisory board, but that's like the name suggests, it's an advisory board. It hasn't come to something like international nuclear energy that can have a more fundamental impact on how AI is regulated. But because of AI takes so much energy, so critical in the future of our society, there should be some kind of international corporations and standard setting. Countries need to share their best practices and set like common sustainability standards for data centers, or try to resist unnecessary duplications. But this is a very tricky subject because as countries try to build out their own sovereign AI. But as a tech reporters and someone who truly believes AI is for the all goods of all humans, I think the world needs a network, not silos, and not a very confrontational competitions view on AI and its development. And AI could be green and it could benefit everywhere. It just takes corporations and not view these as the zero-sum games. And the last point I like to raise, which is not going to be music to the ears to a lot of our private sector participants today, but I do think we need to hold industry accountable. The industry, kudos to them to lead a lot of efforts in terms of corporate purchasing renewable powers, being carbon neutral, or try to find like new technologies that can solve the climate crisis and the energy crisis. But we need a more transparent reporting of AI energy usage and emissions, like the ChatGPT query energy report I mentioned at the beginning of my brief. We actually didn't know, like, how much energy does one ChatGPT query use until very recently. And it takes a lot of more energy than I think a lot of people would imagine. So we do need a third party or an industry association type of agency to hold those industry accountable. And we need the company probably in the future to include the AI energy usage and emission report when they are trying to build out these massive data centers all around the world. And obviously, we need to also get some transparency on government incentives like tax credits and power power tariffs with clean energy performance, like why this company is getting this much tax breaks or incentives, and how much renewable energy it put back to the grid, and why it's getting this instead of the others. That part of the effort, the government part of effort, I think is kind of tricky given the current administration's focus more on keeping up with China or, beating China in the AI race. But going forward, maybe down the line, I think that could be a good part for the government work to focus on. And we need to have this positive feedback loop that like companies that build on renewable energy, that contribute more renewable energy back to the grid will get more, tax breaks and others. So that is some of the thoughts and observations I've noticed during my reporting of the topic. Obviously, the AI build-out is just at the beginning, despite the billions of $billions we've already seen investing into the area in the past 3-4 years. But trust me, like this is just the beginning of the things. As much energy as we see or project AI will use today, it could be triple, double, triple, quadruple that in the future. So this discussion today is something really critical, not for right now, it's for generations to come. And I do hope you have a lot of good questions for me. And John, let me know if there's any question you want to start with.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Yifan, for that briefing. It was very thorough. You did mention the United Nations, and you did mention the need for some transparency and some sharing from the private sector. So it is related, and you did sort of answer here in your question. But I'll ask it again anyway. There's a lot of questions here. But Dr. Aaron, kind of throw this out there too. Where there are solutions across the value chain of AI and data processing tech, do you think a global consortium to think, deliberate, and action across the value chain is required? And I would add to this question a little bit is, has there been any conversations amongst the private sector and companies in this regard? And what has been their reaction or disposition to such an idea?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the private sectors actually talk a lot about the energy supply, either in private conversations or in public panels a lot. They know this is a topic that's critical to their future because access to clean, sustainable, and high density energy is something all companies need, and it's not a proprietary, IPs that they can't share with each other. So I do know companies are talking to each other about this. Whether there's collaborations or corporations, that's already happening. I'm not sure about that, but I'm sure in the future we're gonna see more companies work together to either build out facilities or clean energy supplies, and adding that back to the grid, or whether through that corporations with each other or through the government. We can see that happening down the line for sure. And as to the questions of whether an international alliance would need to be formed to make this future happen, I think it really depends country by country, region by region. In Southeast Asia, I can see something like that happen, but collaborations between U.S. and China, obviously, like the U.S. now has a different views in terms of the carbon footprint and the Paris Agreement from many other countries. So the U.S. alone is a different case, but especially when it involves competitions among AI advancement, I don't really see a alliance of some sort could be happening between US and China in the short term, despite it's not like a technology partnership. It's more on the energy side. Even that, I think that's going to be difficult. But more regional effort, like, in North America, in Southeast Asia, or in Latin America, I do see those regions could work together and put out a standard for AI energy use in the future.
So I'm going to kind of pivot, but also still kind of related to this question. One of the things that stood out from your briefing was that comment by the California chip executive about the disposition of companies. That it is you invest in renewables because it's good to there's money involved here. And the question here is kind of a comment, but the profit bottom line is a wall for tech and AI developers. So it's really for any business, really, not just tech. And no company will bankrupt itself on principle. Otherwise, the CEO will be fired. So what other guardrails are being thought of? Is it regulatory by governments? Are governments thinking about this? And to go a little further here, too, is what has been the attitudes of these tech companies working on AI and tech to conversations around regulations?
Right. That's why I think at the end of my briefing, I mentioned the point about holding industry accountable, because I relate so much with that comment. Companies are not going to bankrupt themselves for principles. Their number one priority is always to make more money. And, being energy efficient obviously help with their bottom line, but that's pretty much it. What we need is a third-party watchdog agencies, whether it can be industry association or more formal government or even like international alliance. But we need some kind of third-party agency that's like unbiased and doesn't have a stake into how much money they make by building how much data center, and encourage for those agencies to oversee the process and making sure when they say they use this much AI energy and it adds this much value back to the supply chain, back to the energy grid, it's real. There is no accounting or, audit process for that part of process as I know of. But I do think that's an area both, industry and the government need to work together. As for AI regulations, like in the US, more specifically, we've seen some state level effort. Like California is really advanced in terms of AI regulations. It's one of the first states that put out some kind of regulations on the state level to try to regulate those AI tech giants, because so much of them is headquartered here in California. But on the federal level, as I mentioned, the focus for the Trump administration is really advancing AI and compete with China in this AI race. They do see, and the administration's main stance for companies and private sectors is deregulation. AI is not an exception. We are already seeing Trump has, retract some of the Biden era guidelines in terms of how federal agencies should be using AI. That includes, like the AI system need to be audited, including there's no bias, discrimination going on. Those are kind of gone. So I really don't see much of effort of AI regulations can be happening in the short term on a federal level here in the US. But other countries like EU, the EU AI Act, that's the first AI law we've seen in the world. Obviously, there's a lot of critiques towards EU AI Act, say it can suffocate innovations, and the private sectors are fighting back on that as well. And in China, there's also like AI regulation guidelines putting out by the cyber administrations. That is more, towards along with a lot of the regulations we see in China about, making sure the AI is aligned with the country's communism idealism. So it's kind of different ways, from the different ways of thinking in China than compared to when we talk about AI regulation here in the US. So yes, there is regulatory efforts putting towards by many other governments, but in the US, on a federal level, not so much right now.
And kind of, just kind of also still looking at the private sector. So, you mentioned some companies are, trying, doing the carbon, trying to bring the carbon output lower by buying up renewables. But what would you say in your investigation? Like, what companies have been good at thinking ahead about this issue, or are many assuming that its energy demands will be, solved by the energy industry or governments? Are there good stories out there of, of companies that are really looking at this seriously?
I think companies who have more skin in the game, they think more about these topics. Like the capital intensive, infrastructure intensive companies like the cloud operators, the three big cloud operators, Amazon Web Service, Microsoft, and Google, combined, they hold about 70% of global cloud market. And that means they have a lot data centers all around the world, and it's a big investment. It's a very capital intensive business. So they will need to find a way to squeeze the cost and making sure their margin is as high as possible. And they have done a lot of good works. Like I mentioned, AWS is actually the largest corporate buyers of renewable energy. It built out a lot of wind and solar projects in India and in Asia. And Microsoft, it also buys a lot of renewable energy, and Google as well. And chip makers like Nvidia, AMD, Intel, they lead the US in terms of chip development, and a lot of the business and their future business going to come from data centers buying chips. Or Intel and AMD more so, they see a lot of demand from edge AI, like local AI as well. The computer chips we use today, they need to be energy efficient as well. So they did a lot of in terms of technology innovations to making sure the energy consumption by the chips are not as huge as their prior generation chips. But I think those companies do have more skin in the game. They know how much energy consumptions will dictate their bottom line and also demand from consumers. So they put more work into that. But other companies, AI research companies, I don't want to name names, but you can see some of the statement by those very famous AI people. You can clearly tell they assume, all the energy should go to us, and we shouldn't be held accountable just because we create so much value by our AI applications or AI models. I think they are less involved into the actual operations of data centers or the energy demand. So they are they did less work on that energy efficient front.
This is a pretty good segue, because you mentioned AWS again and how much they're doing. So there's a question here from Vivian in the comment section, and I'm just going to kind of skip to the main question, which is, from your perspective, is this meaningful pathway towards real decarbonization, or are we at risk of overestimating the positive impact of these commitments in light of rising energy demands, especially from AI?
My personal opinion is carbon offset is better than nothing. It's not really, a transitioning towards a renewable energy grid, but it's better than, corporates ignores any climate impact they have in the world. So to Vivian's questions, yes, I do think this is a positive step, a right direction towards a renewable future, green future we all need, but it's not enough. We need new technology and better calculations and better optimizations and better regulatory efforts to hold these companies accountable, to make sure it's not just about buying renewable energy from another place while adding a lot of wasteful data centers by burning coals, gas, and other ways. There's definitely more things corporates need to do and more oversight from either industry associations or government to make that happen. But it's a positive step forward, I would say.
We're running out of time here, and there are just some good questions here. They're getting a little in the weeds of technology advancing, but I would like to close this with, very often it's very easy to kind of point out the bad, point out the companies who are maybe perhaps being the bad players and not quite, it's very easy to, look at it that way. But I would like to end this a little differently. Are there any companies to watch, who are trend setting in a positive direction, and that, they would be the ones that you would hope would continue to be the trendsetters in that positive direction? Through the course of the investigation, have you seen any of those, and would you mind sharing those?
I think when we talk about the energy supply or the energy demand, we often look to the data center operators or the energy companies. But I will point to the semiconductors. That's they supply all the chips and infrastructures behind all the data centers. Those companies are often overlooked of how significant a role they play in this AI energy transition. Like Nvidia, AMD, their GPUs supply to most of the data centers in the world. So I think we also need to talk to them and look at what they are doing. They are already doing a lot of good works for the Blackwell generation chips. Nvidia is already becoming a lot more cost energy efficient than the Hopper series. So I would think the semiconductors are actually a big part of it, and we need to pay more attention to what they do and what they offer, and choose the right more energy efficient chips for your data centers going forward.
Well, Yifan, we're just stepping out of time, but thank you for taking the time to be with us. And I would like to thank the audience for being here with us and offering a lot of questions. Just time is always a factor here. So thank you again for being here. Thank you to the audience. And again, thank you for Nikkei Asia for partnering up with us for this event, and we'll hope to do more in the future. Everyone, have a nice day.
Yeah. Bye. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.